Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Valoranting. It has already been 4 weeks, and I'm very excited to introduce once again my co-host Pansy. This week we are joined by Vegas.
What's
He's
up?
playing on Highground currently, an up-and-coming Valorant team. We've got an
Hey,
absolute ton of stuff to talk about this week. Pansy, Vegas, how you feeling this week?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. I've kind of dipped away from Valorant for a little bit, but now I'm heading right back in. I had to, had to cast some PUBG, so I had to remind myself of that game. But now I've got some Valorant coming up. I'm looking forward to kind of catching up myself on some of the topics and also diving in on some of what's just happened in the scene.
I can relate to you on that one. I had to play in the PUBG tournament you were casting without playing the game in 2 months. That was interesting.
It
Other than
has,
that, I'm pretty exhausted.
yeah, PCS just wrapped up this last weekend. I hope you both had a fun time, but it's all focused back on Valorant for this week as there is a ton going on. Let's jump right into it. We have some communications coming out from many communications coming out from the Valorant dev team. They've been very chatty this week. A lot of announcements coming out. First of all, let's lead in with the hit register issue that we've had or experienced the last little bit. It's been reported to Riot, and they are trying to fix it as they were talking about here on Twitter. Vegas, in your experience in the last little bit, I know you've been playing some PUBG, but has there been any obvious hit register issues that you've been experiencing?
Some of my teammates have been pointing it out. I've only experienced it like once or twice, but some of my teammates, specifically on higher ping, get it pretty often, and they're pretty frustrated about it.
As you can see, the Riot dev team has been all over it. They've been soliciting a lot of feedback from the community and have been very communicative and actually have been doing a great job explaining what the issues are in a timely basis. At this stage, looking back over the last couple of years in gaming, competitive or otherwise, obviously with Valve not being very talkative ever at all in any arena, it's really nice to see this. Pansy, is this something that we hope to continue to see through the release of Valorant?
I hope so, and I think it's to me that stands out the most is one, they trust their higher end audience and player base to actually be right about some of these things. And I know that sounds weird because you'd imagine developers would do that, but I'm friends with a lot of developers as well that not from Valve or Riot specifically, other games that FPS oriented or not. And the amount of times they just simply don't take the feedback seriously, or they don't treat it like a, oh, this is an immediate problem. So for me to see the devs kind of taking it on board super quick, addressing it and going, well, actually, this is a problem and this is what we found might be causing it, and acting on that, it's very rare. One, to admit fault. Like I love devs and they deal with a lot of shit. Don't get me wrong. Like 90% of what the community might tell them will be garbage, but you have to kind of skim the top, right? And you might get some good feedback. But Riot seems to be doing well at that, which is quite rare, and it's something that should be rewarded and should be kind of held in high esteem because, as I said, so few others give a fuck. So it's nice to hear them kind of take it on board and in a timely manner doing something about it.
Absolutely, Vegas. I mean, coming from PUBG, let's talk a little bit about the contrast between what kind of communications that you're used to seeing and what you're seeing from the Riot devs.
I mean, jumping on board week one Valorant beta, I was in Discords where I've talked to more Valorant devs in week one and Discords of the closed beta than I did in my entire 2-3 years in PUBG, and it's very welcoming as a player considering switching over games, and then all of your problems are being like fixed very quickly. All your questions are being asked every time you have a cheater in your games. You can get them banned within 20 minutes just through Discords. It's very welcoming.
Speaking of cheaters getting banned, another 1,600 accounts banned this week.
Oof.
I'm actually liking the I don't know what you want to call this, the flair that's coming from the anti-cheat team, and we've actually got a pretty funny compilation video of the other side of what these 1,600 accounts look like. This is from various discords around the internet, compiled, and some choice words from these guys. But it's always fun to see the other side of all these guys getting hardware ID banned in a free to play environment when cheating is going to be a potential issue. All these hardware ID bans, all these various different ways for Riot to go after these guys has been awesome, and it's really important to see that. Even though Vanguard has had its ups and downs, Pansy, you love to see this type of thing since these guys
You
are
do
getting
love to see it.
completely erased.
Yep.
Dude, it's so much fun seeing this. Just like the saltiness, like instantly in the discords. It's just like that to me is perfect. And I mean, what a great response, right? Like the community hates this, right? They hate, having cheers in your game. No one enjoys it. So like when this does happen, make these compilations. Like give me all those salty tears, bottle that shit up. Like that brings me so much joy because like cheaters as well, like they're so like cocky and like super like, in your face about it. Like don't get me wrong, there's a side of it of people who will do like the super private cheats that will be like, no one's gonna full spin bot in a game. Like that's a whole different thing. But these are the kids who'll sit there, like download it, pay like £5 on like PayPal and be like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking destroy Hiko today. It's like, all right, bud. Nice work, nice work.
I really like the public like Terminator style of it. Like they're all targeting this one figurehead about like I hate this guy. This is our target, and they're all posting pictures of him. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, the cheating has been, man, it's just pervasive in the last couple of years, where so many more games are online services, and you're forced into this arena where, especially on PC, you're going to come across cheaters all the time. So I'm interested in Vegas, actually, in your experience. I think a lot of the issue, at least early on with the anti-cheat, was in high level match play. Did you have a lot of experience coming across cheaters in that situation?
Yeah, I would say it was really bad about 2, 3 weeks ago. I think 2, 3 weeks ago, it was like almost every other game. It was like either a closet cheater or just a full on blatant spin botter, and that was pretty tilting. I think that was the worst it's been. After more people hit the higher ranks, it's really more like a 1 in 10, and it used to be like every other game 10, I think.
So would you say that's because of Riot eliminating cheaters, or just them getting filtered out slowly from not being able to make it into the higher elos?
I think it's probably a mix of both. I think it's definitely a mix of both for sure.
Well, there is some other developments, more so on the system side, as Riot has a lot going with Valorant. They've got their, I'm not sure if you're aware, but they have this internal or this Riot-owned ISP that has all these different data points all around North America and various places around the world that hopefully bring better connection services. But as any new service will endure, there are some glitches. So they're asking for some feedback around network issues, specifically around routing ISP info. This is, of course, to improve their overall service, but early days still. It's going to take some refining. So if you are experiencing weird routing issues, don't forget to submit that over to Riot so they can improve the system for everybody. And the last thing I wanted to talk about on the communications actually comes from Hiko, echoing Vegas's sentiments. And he had some very nice words to say about the communication coming from Riot that we've seen early so far.
The sad thing is, and maybe it's a streamer thing, but I was a pretty big CSGO streamer too. I've talked to more people that work at Riot in the past month than I have ever in my entire career playing CS for 18 years. I've literally talked to more people from Riot in the last month than I have my entire life with Valve. And I mean, I know Valve wasn't, CS before 1.6, but it's kind of weird, isn't it? Like how Riot is a lot more community receptive and community outreach compared to Valve, who's more like, we're gonna do our.
That's tough.
Good stuff. And I think we can all agree, and I'm not going to force you all to say it again, but Riot's communications have been top tier. And I think and Pansy, you can maybe echo this in Vegas as well. We're all in the PUBG community. We've seen what non-communication or bad communication can lead to as far as community sentiment is concerned. Do you think that's forefront in Riot's minds?
I think it's very fresh for, I come from CS, PUBG, and now Valorant, right? I've been through the the meat grinder of bad communication or no communication. I mean, Valve, for one thing, like being a commentator, you'd see the Valve employees like these fabled unicorns at the majors, and that was it. And that's if you're lucky. If you knew who to look out for, you'd be like, I've seen one. That's them. And they just hover away. They go into the server room and escape, and they never come back. It's just like, I know they're out there. And there was like a feedback email, and that was all you got, really. I know that there was a couple more communication routes for pro players, but again, clearly they weren't very receptive, or they didn't give much. And to be fair, if that is Valve's way of doing things, fair enough. Do your thing. You've made a good game. Yeah, it could be improved. do whatever. I think the one problem with PUBG communication, and I still work on their product, so I'm not going to sit here and talk trash, but it's not that they didn't communicate, it was that it wasn't like clear communication. It was like you feel like you speak to one person, you get one answer, and then you'd have that in mind, but then 2 weeks later you'd speak to another person, they're like, oh no, we've never heard that. It's just like it feels like you had that NA, EU, Korea, like miscommunication problem that happened, and Riot feels like so far. Don't get me wrong, I know that in the past Riot definitely had issues of creating an even field from EU to NA, especially because they're separate offices, right? Most of these companies will have separate offices doing somewhat of a similar thing, but in their own way. But so far the communication has been, one voice or, a couple of voices, but all with the same things, right? They're not miscommunicating. And it's nice to have like, okay, this is my answer. I can focus on that. I don't need to go and talk to X or Y or Z and hope that they all line up. It's like, yep, that's cool. That's what I wanted to hear.
It's not just one communication coming out. They say, well, listen, we're not going to have the comms people write everything. Let's bring the people in that are responsible for the stuff we want to talk about and let them explain it, because that's what you want to hear. And, I'm not going to, I'm in the same position. PUBG is, has been out for a long time, and they haven't really improved. But you talk about Riot coming in and trying to, improve and be candid and direct. That's something that I think anyone can appreciate, especially in the North American audience, where it's like, hey, this is the issue. This is what we've heard. This is what we're doing. That's all we need to hear. Instead of, go ahead, Vegas.
It seems nice. It seems like it's like they're taking advantage of other players, knowing that they're knowing all these other players are frustrated with X, Y, and Z about, they know that all these other pros are frustrated with their game and frustrated with communication. So now they're releasing this this product, and then they're doing the exact opposite. So I feel like it's helping them take away all these top players and bring them to their game, just because they're being the best when it comes to communication and stuff like that.
And it makes you feel safe. That's the one thing I take away from it, is that they're on it, they're paying attention, and they're addressing it. And they had one more announcement as we move into the next topic that is relatively important, and let's jump right into it. Closed beta is ending on May 28th. Anna Donnelly got on with I think, who is this other gentleman here? That's is that Jay? I can't recall. Ziegler. Either way, they were out there talking and kind of teasing about what might happen, but they did drop it on us. It is going to be releasing early June 2nd. Valorant is launching. Pansy, thoughts on that?
I think if anyone has played alphas, betas, closed betas, whatever you want, this has been one of the most polished products to come out as of late. And I think when anyone picked it up at the start, even in the first, when it was like the closed time, when if you're in the Discord, you could have a couple of games before, and they did the little presentation to explain some stuff. Just looking at it, you're like, this is way further ahead than most betas that we've had. It's pretty fleshed out. It's got a lot of things going on, let alone the test versions they probably have for themselves that obviously they're working on in the background, right? Like the released version is not normally the latest version by a long margin. I'm sure they've got a good couple of maps ready to go, good couple of agents ready to go. So it's like, I'm not surprised seeing it out this early, but again, they're moving super quick, and so far they're keeping up with it. I think there's something to be said about, taking your time on certain things and not just going, well, here's our full product, just get out there, now you can buy skins, have a good time, give us some money back. But they've actually given a very good product for what it is so far, and it was very surprising how far along it is in development already for when it just came into our eyesight to now is pretty solid.
Yeah.
And I look at the launch of beta. It seems like the beta period, well, mainly because we're all sitting at home and time no longer matters to anybody. But the the period of the beta didn't seem like that long. I expected it to go a little bit longer. June 2nd is right around the corner. It's it's almost just under a week from now. I would say, looking at the calendar. Yeah, it's literally a week from now. So are they ready? I mean, they have battle passes coming out. They've already talked about their immediate post launch plans. The only thing that's really going to be changing and resetting is any currency you spent. We're ready to go. So it's do you think right now, Vegas, is this game ready to be launched? Is this a product that's ready to be for the masses?
Yeah, I think it's definitely ready. Like, I actually sometimes forget that we were even in a beta. Like I've been playing scrims and people are getting signed and everything seems like it's very fluent. And then everyone's like, okay, wait, this is a beta or like an alpha? You know, it seems like definitely it's time, I think.
And the beta mindset, it didn't really feel like a traditional, like we're not really testing. There was no real stability issues. This thing kind of came out ready to go. And aside from some UI updates, I'm sure there's going to be some big updates coming to the launch version. They do want to make a splash, but they did a great job kind of recapping everything that went on in beta. And I'm super glad that the things like anti-cheat stability, network stability, all these things were kind of pressure tested in beta, so that hopefully the Valorant can have a nice, easy launch. What do you think is going to be the first couple of weeks? What does that look like for Riot launching this new product, Pansy?
I think it's going to be just a global stress test. We had like, in my eyes, this wasn't really a beta. They pushed out a product that was pretty good to go. There was, there have been tweaks, there have been adjustments. We heard the communication, we've all seen it. It's good. Vanguard got pushed to its limits for sure. Like it's all there. So that's all like a good thing. But honestly, I just felt this was a huge server test to see if they could actually keep up with the demand so far. I mean, the only issues I ever saw were really on the first couple of play days, where I think they got a little surprised by the amount of people that were hammering it instantly. And I mean, that was before it was streamable. This was super, super early on. So again, I think this has been a huge stress test server side, and this is just in my personal experience. Normally, this is what it is. I mean, if there are glaring bugs, which, were found, they got fixed pretty quick. So they were up for it. I mean, I think the one thing I worry about is, how much content is there when it releases to grind for? Obviously, the rank's coming out, but I want... God, give me... If you remember Clanbase or, any of those old sites, got frag and stuff like that. If you ever, give me a ladder system, give me like a Nations Cup, but put it in the client. Like give me something to grind for your average player. Like obviously if you're a pro player or someone to go pro or towards the top end of the scene, you'll be playing on third-party sites anyway. You're not going to be in the client really doing that stuff. Like once you get your rank, cool, done. That's for stream. That was exciting. That gave me 3 days more worth of content. But you'll be over on your ESCAs, your faces, whatever it will be, whatever that third party is going to be. But the other thing is spectator client needs to hurry up and get polished, if I'm honest. Like visibly, this game wants to be watched. People want to watch it. They want to see the top players looking, sharp. They want to get, the idea of what's going on. Currently, the worst part of Valorant is the spectator client, and that's something that most people won't realize until you try and watch a couple of tournaments. You're like, okay, it's pretty lackluster. It's not quite there yet. So I hope that's a big focus coming up. Obviously in closed beta, it's not a huge thing. If you're running tournaments, you know what you're getting into, right? Like you're jumping on a beta product. But now if you're going to full launch the game, you got to polish that out. I don't want to see this shitty spec client that looks like it's been, a rush job. Don't leave us with, a PUBG scenario a year down the line and the spec client's still janky as fuck. Give me something real nice to work with here, because Riot can do that. They know how to do it. You look at CS:GO, you go, right, that works. Let's just make our own version, change the UI. Awesome. Like it's already there. So just polish that up and I'll be happy. And obviously I'm a commentator, so of course I want a nice spec client to work with. So,
Also, I think one of my biggest concerns was adding content on release, but it seems like they're adding like a battle pass sort of thing on day one of launch.
Nice.
That'll be good content for casual players. Like they also have their like daily challenges or whatever. I also think a big thing is I think there definitely needs to be more agents and maps pretty soon, and I'm glad that that's coming on release. But also, I also think it's very interesting. This kind of goes back to our topic about like quickly responding to the community. Is there was a map that was strongly disliked, and in the beta they already reworked the map, which I think is incredible.
We're talking about Split, I imagine.
Split, yeah, Split. They already reworked the map in the beta, which is pretty insane. Also, I think there's going to be a new map coming on day one of release for the battle pass. They're refunding all the credits, new skin packages. I think that's great content. One thing I would like to see is I think the ranked mode is. It's you can reach the highest rank way too quickly, and I also think that's more like a content thing. Is you're grinding ranked, but you shouldn't be able to grind the max rank in 2 days or whatever. Obviously, that's the top 1%, but it is way too easy compared to the other Riot games like League of Legends to get to the highest ranks.
Do you think that might be a symptom of the amount of players playing? But I mean, looking at the skins bit, the interesting thing here, and I'm not sure why they decided to do this. But they're refunding all the skin purchases that you bought in beta. Maybe the skins weren't ready. They were just like test skins or whatever, but you will be getting your currency back if you did spend money like I did. Their skins were definitely a premium, so I'm glad I'll be having a chance to respend some of that money, even if I can't put it back into my PayPal account. It's an interesting thing that they kind of approach the skin argument with learning, and I wanted to touch on one quick thing. Going back to the tournaments, Lauren, do you think that Fortnite is something like of a model for Riot to look at for the in-client competitive incentives? Fortnite has weekly cups where you can compete for money. Do you think that Valorant has, or a game like Valorant has space to move into a model like that where you could run it through the client, or will they be leaving that to the ESLs and the GLLs of the world?
I want there to be the option for it. I think it's something that most games haven't done to a highly competitive standard. And I think it's a huge missing element. Like, I wish that rather than me having to go to a third party site, I could sit there and, you have to keep the same 5, or let's say you have a 7-man roster and you have to play within that 7, otherwise you can't queue for this specific mode. Yes, the queue times are long, but that's your cup. You can do it in the client and you get your in-game, let's say you get a ladder if you're the top of the ladder, let's say you win a Nations Cup or whatever it is, you get the little cup icon or you get a little skin or something that commemorates or, capitalizes on that. I am waiting for a game to do it well. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know Fortnite well enough, if I'm honest, to know what they actually do. If they've already started doing this, it's probably the first developer I've seen doing it, and I've been asking for years. I know StarCraft did it a little bit. I think they had an in-game system, but I don't just mean like a ranked solo queue or ladder system. I want tournaments able to be run in the client. I want them to have control of the rewards that you get. You could really make something super, super fun and exciting, and I haven't seen it done well, and Riot has the capability now to do it, right? You have the perfect client audience that's competitive, that's also grassroots. They want to get away into it, and for some people, going on Faceit and ESEA and all these other, whatever sites, it's a bit too intimidating. You think, oh, that's super out of my league. How about me and my buddies? We just want to play the game, but, competitive queue's boring. We've all hit our rank, now what? Well, that's where you go. That's the next step in. You start playing in these cups. You start playing in this. You start making a name for yourself. That's super cool. And then maybe you could have, a system to watch the game in the client. Let's say it's that weekly cup. The teams are playing. There's a stream that you can watch that's embedded in the client when you click onto that specific tab. Not auto playing, none of that shit. But you go to it and you can enjoy it. Like, I want to build something around that sort of element that I haven't seen done well in an FPS game specifically, but I know a couple others have tried it, but I think Riot's in the position where they could make something great.
And they have the foundation. Yeah. Go ahead, Vegas. Yeah.
Okay, so Fortnite's whole esports ecosystem is done through in-client. Like, all of their big tournaments, all the World Cup and everything, that's all in-client, and that's their whole point. Is like the whole player base is pretty younger, but you're even allowed to play in any of their big tournaments at 13 through the client. So that's what Fortnite's done. Their entire esports system is through that. And I think Riot saw that like a year ago, and Riot started testing these type of in-client tournaments they started doing that in League of Legends about a year ago. They started doing like League of Legends Clash, where you get your roster and you start playing in tournaments in the client. I know some people I know people that, teammates of mine in PUBG would go on with our PUBG team and play in Riot in-client tournaments. And I think that's something they might have been testing for this game, maybe, like Riot, they've tested in League in the past. So I'm hoping eventually they put in-client tournaments in Valorant.
That'd be cool.
I think they're probably going to, if they were testing it in League.
I hope to see it. There's lots to develop there still. It's very early days, but one thing that has been moderately confirmed is obviously new content coming for launch. We did get a small teaser, very small, of the new agent. My opinion is that it is a foot. That's my opinion. We don't really have much else to go off of. Nice shoes, I guess, but there's a new agent coming. Any predictions, Pansy?
I don't know. I mean, so it's like in my head, I'm thinking what's left. If you look at utility in a FPS game, you've got decoys that haven't been used yet. I think there was a leak in regards to maybe an agent that could do that down the line. I don't think they look like that though. So, if that's going to be the case, that could be a different rework, or it could be a completely different agent. So decoy grenades could be one of them. That could be their thing. Or you look at something like a tank, for example, that could give out armor potentially. So these sort of ideas, right? Like that shoe. Again, I can't believe we're dissecting a shoe, but here we are. What can you do? That doesn't look like a tank, nor does it potentially fit that decoy role. But again, I'm not an art developer. it could be anything really. I know there's been a couple of leaks in regards to like a vampire style character, but who knows? I mean, it could be anything. Honestly, I really hope they don't do too many agents. That's my big worry, is that it gets flooded with agents and suddenly it dilutes it a
the
little bit.
Overwatch issue.
You want to Exactly. I don't want Rainbow Six in that regard. You know, I want people to really hit the skill ceiling on all of these agents and like learn how to play them super well, rather than going, well, here's this cheesy pick, right, without a pick and ban phase. And I don't want a pick and ban phase in this when it comes to agents. I want to just see good players be able to play what they want, right? But yeah, I don't know. God knows. I think, as I said, decoys are coming out probably at some point, and then some sort of shield-esque tank style agent would be a smart bet, but who knows?
I think there's a major lack in support or healing characters in this game. Some people have done some analytics based on all the major tournaments, and Sage is a 100% pick rate over hundreds and hundreds of competitive games. I think it's a major problem that some of the characters are like 5% pick rates and some are 100% or even like 99.9. And I think that's a major problem. It's like there's only one character that can heal you. Well, Phoenix can heal himself, but I think it's a problem that there's only one character that can heal your teammates. I think there needs to be a one or two more of like the support, healer, armor type of characters, something like that.
Yeah.
My personal guess is they might start having agents be paired off with their counters. So Cypher, obviously a big part of competitive play right now, his traps and camera and everything else like that. I'm thinking, you know, just off the wall, maybe like a Sombra style character that, you know, can detect abilities, or, you know, something of that nature, can block abilities. I don't know. We'll see. Well, I'm sure we'll find out very soon, but we have more to talk about. Moving on, there are some teams getting signed, and some have already been signed. So let's talk a little bit about some of these popular orgs jumping in. Gen G did sign their entire French-Canadian roster, and they ended up winning relatively quickly. They took the T1 Invitational over Brax's squad. Here's a couple of clips from that. We did talk about this last week. Pansy, right out of the gate, Nip, Cloud9. We've all seen some forays from these top tier orgs. Is this serious? Are these serious competitive pickups? Many of these rosters are incomplete. What do you think? What do you think that kind of points to early on for these organizations entering Valorant?
I mean, for a lot of these orgs, they just want to get some players in, right? It's a big name beside a lot of tournaments. A lot of eyes go on towards it. Same with like the Sentinels roster there. It's like, you know, when PUBG first came out, and you had the same teams coming in. You had TSM, Cloud9. Although they like to do the same sort of approach, pick up a good couple of teams, you know, potentially streamers who have, you know, a big reputation in the community, a big presence in the community, and potentially, you know, it probably wouldn't be the end amount of money these players will receive if it goes up or down. But for now, they've probably come in on a pretty high standpoint, but they can also sell on at a pretty high standpoint, right? So it's like, I feel like, in my eyes, I remember, you know, the Break roster, you know, the Vis, that sort of thing, where it's like you pick up some very popular names in the community who've been streaming, grinding, who are very competitive, but may not end up being, you know, the eventual FaZe clan, but, or, you know, whomever you want to look at. But within that moment, they're, you know, a pillar within the community, and it's a good standpoint to be in, because at worst, they just become a streamer on your org, right? And maybe you can't sell them on for a big amount of money, but you still have good exposure. Whereas in the better thing, let's say one of the or two of the players do get good. Okay, well, we can either sell them on or build a new roster around it. I know a lot of orgs look at it at this point because you can get in on the ground level pretty easily. Some orgs are offering crazy money. I mean, if it comes around, take it, go off. Sometimes they'll also get pretty lowballed on it, because it is also, you know, you don't know what the scene's going to look like down the line. So it's a bit of it's the Wild West out there right now.
I think that style is fizzling out a little bit in this type of game. Like the whole like pick up the content creator thing. I think that's good for some orgs, but I think this game is going to have more of like picking up raw 5-man rosters that you think are going to be your competitive roster. But I think in PUBG, obviously, it made way more sense to do like what TSM did. I think in this game, it's since just the raw nature of the game, I think it's going to make a lot more sense to be picking up these 5-man competitive rosters.
Yeah, and you know, they're coming from all over the place. This is Nip's, I guess, lead guy talking about where they picked up this roster. This is a former Paladins team. They did win the World Championship. Paladins, I guess the B League Overwatch, if you want to call it that. But they have decided to move away from Paladins for whatever reason, have come over to Valorant as a squad. So they do have that inherent team, I guess, cohesion that they obviously would have had to have competing at a high level in their previous esport, regardless of the size or the relevance in the current landscape. These are guys that are bringing team experience into a new game that hopefully they can expand upon and grab their fifth and become a formidable force. Vegas, is there hunger right now? Obviously, everyone wants to have that salary, become a legitimate player, that kind of thing. But is there, how would you rate that hunger of getting signed right now in the overall competitive community in Valorant?
Well, the hunger is there. I mean, obviously, we've known about this game for a while, and I know personally our team has been talking about making teams and being the best in this game like 6 months before the release. So there's definitely a major hunger because we've been waiting for this, waiting for a solid game we can be the best in for so long. At the end of the day, no one's going to sign anything you're not comfortable with. So, the hunger is more so just grinding to be the best. But like the hunger to getting signed is obviously just depends on your team's individual economics. But for the most part, the hunger is like a 10 for grinding to be better. The org signing is all just whatever comes at you.
And Pansy, you touched on this a little bit. Do you believe that these are rosters that are getting signed just to wait and see? Obviously, Sentinels was the marquee pickup, mainly due to Sinatra coming away from Overwatch League as the reigning MVP. We've talked it to death at this stage. But these guys are signing incomplete rosters. Do you think that there is potential for this to just be a wait and see, and maybe we can sell these guys for later? You did touch on it a little bit, but do you think that's the forefront, or do you think that's just the escape hatch?
I think it's probably the smart thing to do because, as I said, like the amount of times you'll look at the start of a brand new game, some players are super hungry, super keen to grind, super into it, and then they just don't keep that up. So locking in a full 5-man roster is pretty dangerous. You're kind of investing into that longer run, right? You buy a full squad, let's say from a smaller game, or you've got to hope that they keep that hunger, that they actually are super serious about it, because obviously they have to come in and transfer all their skills, which some people can do and some people can't, right? But you don't find that out for the first couple of months, and that's a good couple of tournaments down the drain, and you block players into a salary. So for the orgs, it's a bit of a gamble. It's what you get, right? You can either do the fall into a 5-man team, pick them up, hope they keep that sort of keenness, that willing to grind, that want, that passion, and some of them will, and that's a huge and a good investment, right? That's when it works out that way. But then you've got to look at, like, in my mind, Cloud9, obviously it's, well, how do we fill out that final 4 people for TenZ, right? Like, he's been doing great, but do we want to commit to the other 4? Are they the best we can get right now? What's our budget? Where are we looking with this? I think it splits into 2 camps in my mind. I respect the teams or the organizations that pick up full teams and go, right, you're a roster, grind. I'm going to give you, let's say, 5 months to give me some damn good results, right? That's your salary for 5 months. Go and grind it out, right? I want to see this many results. This is what we want back. We want, top 5, top 3 finishes. Obviously win as many tournaments as you can, right? But that's what we're expecting here. Give them an idea of what you're wanting out of it. But for the TenZ pickup, it's like, well, what do Cloud9 want with that, right? It's like you're putting a lot of faith into a young guy to find 4 other players to gel with him and mesh. And we kind of touched on that with Jordan's show, right? But it's like, what's the time limit? What's the budget? Like, it's too up in the air to tell what they want to go with that. Like, he could pick up 4 completely unknown players who are just like grinders, right? He could just find these guys who've just been solo queue like heroes, pick them up, try and meld them into a team for pretty cheap as fuck. Like, these players will know nothing.
Yeah.
They won't come in with a brand. They won't have anything to bring numbers wise, but potentially they could be huge. So it's like Cloud9's kind of roster with TenZ and co is actually pretty good at the moment, but I'm surprised they haven't locked it in. That's the thing that surprised me. They haven't gone yet.
It kind of reminds me a little bit, and this is inside baseball for the PUBG folks, but it reminds me a little bit about the Andy Pyro situation with Method, where they have their guy, and then they want to start bringing people in around him. And maybe it's looking for that fit because, and Vegas, I don't want to put you on the spot. Obviously, this stuff is probably a little bit too sensitive to talk about, but how close would you say for these incomplete teams? Are we close to seeing a complete roster for Cloud9 in the back channels that you've been maybe privy to?
It seems like their roster's been pretty consistent for the most part throughout what we've seen. It seems like they've gotten pretty comfortable. It seems pretty good.
Well, maybe we'll see an announcement coming up very soon. So a lot of things still in the air when it comes to these incomplete rosters. But as time moves on, especially with launch now imminent, I would expect to see these things start to be solidified very quickly. The one roster that did get signed, moving on to the next topic, is TSM. They did sign a full 5-man roster. the former MouseSpaz team. A lot of recognizable names. I'm going to hand this one completely over to Pansy, since she'll have most of the experience with these guys. Give us an overview of the squad. What's the collective experience here for this new TSM Valorant squad?
It's super solid. Really good team. It's gonna be very hard for me personally to call them TSM rather than like CLG. When I see Cutler, when I see these sort of names, I'm like, oh, it's CLG, right? Got it. But I mean, they were always a very competitive couple of CS players. I think if you look at them individually, they're always incredibly competitive, but they never really pushed through to like high-end tier 1 in CS:GO. They were never, the NA team. They were always around though. They were always kind of on the cusp of doing something right, but the rosters never quite looked correct. They'd have a couple of tournaments here and there, but for me, this is like a fresh start for them. It's very hard mentally to kind of push through. Like, so Broza, again, when he first came onto the CS scene, everyone thought this guy was a cheater, he's this online player, what's he gonna do? And then he kind of faded away and didn't, be the highlight player people thought. But also, he was that kind of solo Q&A player, that kind of super like spicy, but never found that roster right for him. I feel like he never quite slotted in correctly. But with this squad, as said, with a fresh start, you could finally see, the capability that we're all expecting from them in CS:GO, like with Wardle especially. Like, the guy's the great. He's just got that sort of like level-headedness. So Broza, you've got kind of the firepower, that kind of like one-off, goes crazy, pops off. That's what you kind of want, right? Like, you need a couple of those sort of players that will kind of give you a little bit more room to play with. He's that wild card that you've got to put in the right place, but then you just let him loose, right? So it's like, potentially the combination of these players is really, really good, and I'm happy to see it. I've enjoyed watching Cutler for years. I think he's a very strong individual, and he's just, again, like, I watch these guys play CS and they're calm, they're collected, they have all the fundamentals down, and now they have something to grind for where they stand a really good chance of being within that tier 1 scene, obviously, but top 10, rather than being like, oh, every now and then they break into a good tournament. This could be a huge run for them now.
Absolutely. Vegas, I'm interested to know, these are guys that you've likely come across playing the game either in queue or in tournaments. What's it like playing against the team? What do you know about them?
This has been so in Valorant for the first 3 to 4 weeks. It was very tournament based for like these smaller teams trying to become. We're trying to grind and prove to ourselves because I know Norgo is very tournament based. In the last 2 weeks, it's turned more into like a scrim heavy thing and like less tournament, more focused on grinding scrims. Ever since everybody got signed, etc. This team is one of the teams we've been playing the most in scrims. This team has only been beat 3 times out of all the tournaments they've ever played in, and the only teams they've ever been beat by are Gen G, before they got signed to Gen G, and T1, and us. So but they have a very high win rate. They've only been beat by 3 times. I think Drone is somebody to look out for. Drone is somebody they picked up later into the game. Drone, mechanically, one of the best players I've ever played against in this game. He's definitely the standout for me. I believe they weren't playing with him in the beginning, but Drone has really impressed me out of anybody on this team.
You love to see it, and I guess yeah, and I was just kind of getting lost in the headshots there. He's definitely a stylish player, and if I were to just observe the crosshair placement, man, that looks real tight. Love to see it. So Pansy, looking at the roster, you kind of touched on a little bit. Does TSM have expectations of success early on, or is this more of okay, you got the base? TSM has, historically stayed with games for long term. PUBG, obviously, they're still fielding a roster there. Are they in for the long haul, or are they expecting success right out of the gate?
I think you can expect both from this team, right? You should expect success from them, and they're probably going to last. I mean, these players seem like it's a solid 5. Hazed as well. These guys know each other. They know each other's, availability to grind or to commit to things. I'm a little lighter on, knowing Drone, for example, but the others, they're mainstays. TSM picking up is an extremely good move. It's the best of both worlds, right? They're not going to be the highest end. You're not, poaching a Overwatch tier 1 player worth hundreds of thousands of whatever, but they're also probably going to win a couple of these tournaments, like, straight off the bat. They're probably one of the most competitive teams. TSM's done a great thing by picking them up. It should be an investment that lasts a while as well. That's got legs to it, that sort of thing, and I want to see how far they can go. I don't see them having problems for a long time, if I'm honest. I think that's a team that could definitely go the distance. So a nice move from TSM to pick them up. I think that's a really solid investment from them.
Definitely a team to watch, and as a accoutrement to the current landscape of teams getting signed, T1 partnering with Mobalytics as we move on to the next topic. This is a bit of an interesting one. This is an analytical service, essentially partnering with T1 as an organization to provide this back-end service of just analyzing games, providing data to the team so they can understand what's working, what's not working. They have training programs in place, and this is coming on the back of what is essentially a wave movement of support staff entering esports, things like sports psychologists, fitness training, and now analytics as well. This is kind of the full suite, what you typically see in pro sports. Vegas, do you have any experience with these support staff services in your competitive experience? I know Ghost had some of that. What was your experience with that?
Definitely, it's a major help. It's not necessary, but I think it's what pushes teams that are on even levels to just consistently be beating the other teams that are the similar skill. It's definitely a major help for mental health versus like meshing with your teammates' personalities, and just overall health, sleep schedule, diet. It's all those things. Every single little thing affects every single thing you do in the game. So, healthy mind is going to help you perform better in these games, especially when everybody's on an even level. These things help you push over the edge against all the other teams, which is why I think Astralis is really good players, and I think these things push them over the edge and make them dominate consistently because they have the most consistent mental health. They have the most consistent everything else. I think that's a big factor. On Ghost, personally, we had personal trainers that would come to our houses multiple times a week. That helped keeping healthy as well. I think that's all things we'll see in the future. Obviously, the bigger the esport, the more money orgs are putting in, the more of these things we'll have. But it looks like T1 is trying to get a head start in that regard.
Pansy, any thoughts on the efficacy of these support services? Now, these guys are kind of put in a position where, if they wanted to, without any supervision, for lack of a better term, they could just sit at their computers for 14 hours a day, sleep until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, get up, do it all over again, crushing the Uber Eats, McDonald's. Not to point any fingers at Vegas or anything like that, but is this something that you think is going to be necessary in esports in the future?
I think
not necessarily.
I don't know. I think it depends on the players, right? You pick up a team of like 5 young dudes who haven't lived on their own, that haven't had a schedule put in front of them, that now has complete freedom to order an Uber Eats, sleep till 3. It's hard to kind of keep that in check, right? Like it depends on who the person is and who the player is. I think at the very highest end, Vegas was absolutely spot on. Like the finest of margins can make a big difference between two very even teams. And I mean, especially with the Astralis example, she came into that roster, and bear in mind, at the time when she came in to kind of help them, these guys, PUBG, Valorant right now, they're not traveling, right? PUBG used to be, MPL and
no one is.
The European Pro League. And now no one's traveling. You're at home, you're doing your shit, right? Like, let's say you keep to a schedule and you're doing good. That's fine. But back then with CS, it's like you were traveling every week. Device used to hate traveling because he had a medical condition that made him like super unhappy with this. His diet was completely inconsistent. Like, he was very unhappy with it. You look at Get Right, who suffered from these sort of issues as well. Like, just the amount of stress we've seen now, CS players finally saying, I need a break mentally. Like, I can't do this anymore. Like, you've got to think, these CS players were flying in and out of events around the world constantly. The sleeping schedules are fucked. This training schedules, the mentality is, I've got to grind more than the next guy, which means I'm playing 10 hours a day. I'm playing 7 days a week. I don't take a break because, then I'm taking my job for granted, right? The mentality becomes really unhealthy. That whole, like, I've got to grind to win, which is like this weird gamer mindset that just because you're playing a game doesn't, you know what I mean? You still need that break. You still need to take a step back and just kind of refine what you're doing. And I remember speaking to, Dupree and some of the guys. I was pretty good friends with Astralis. And it's like she just made sure that when they were practicing, it was good practice. They treated it like an office. When they didn't sit at home and play, they'd go to the office and play. You separate that kind of church from state, right? When you go into work, you're in your work mindset. You're not sat there in your same clothes, not showered like I am. But I mean, she went on to work with like SK Gaming, ENCE, and I think she went with OG afterwards. So clearly there's something to her work specifically. And if that can be applied throughout, that's a good thing. If you've got the budget, why not do it for your players, right? It could really help them going forward.
And there's a lot to be said about just purely taking care of yourself. And I'll let Vegas kind of cap this topic off, but we all remember 2018, how many we were all over the place, all over the world constantly. And, having contrasted that now to quarantine for 2 straight months, you can see how much of a difference it makes just being able to have that home routine, how much it could either be a benefit or a detriment, depending on who you are. to being at home and at least having the ability to control your own schedule. Vegas, any final thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in the future. For now, it's going to be a major selling point for all these players. Like, your team wants to be the very best, so any org that can pay you a lower salary but provide you with an office and like things to improve your guys' game is a major selling point. Like these things are a really big deal to certain players.
Absolutely. When we come back from the break, which we're going to shortly, we're going to go deep on the Korean esports, the fledgling tournaments happening in the newest region added to Valorant as we move toward launch, and we're going to be going deep with Highground and Vegas. So stick with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back to Valoranting. I'm WTFmoses, of course, joined by Pansy, and this week we're joined by Vegas, professional PUBG, professional PUBG player and hopeful pro in Valorant. As we've been talking about a lot of different things, but right out of the gate, we are jumping into what is probably one of my most exciting things for Valorant, which is the fledgling esports scene in Korea. Korea has had access to the game now for a couple of weeks, and we've had our first tournament result come in. Without getting too deep on the players in the tournament scene in Korea, let's talk a bit, Pansy, about what kind of effect that Korea is going to have on the overall Valorant scene. What do you expect from this region out of the gate?
I expect hard work and grinding, right? They have the it's always been the theory crafting side of games, correct, right? They were the scene's something that always like has been looked up to by NA and EU. They've seemed to kind of set the trends traditionally. I guess again you've got to look at the fact that StarCraft was one of those early titles that the Korean scene just dominated handedly. EU and NA did eventually catch up a little bit, but again, they set the marker. Every single player I know who took themselves seriously took a bout in Korea. They'd go out there and train. They'd learn how these players played, how they practiced. And now, obviously, those skills have been kind of brought back home to EU and NA, and they've kind of learned the ways that these teams, progress and work. So I think the theory has been, I guess, a little unraveled. It has been a little bit seen now and done, but the work ethic is certainly still there. So I think for me, when we look at Korea, it's, what do they come up with? What sort of unique abilities have they found? What ways do they approach the game? The difference, that puts the difference between EU, NA, the other regions I generally look at. It's more, what do they come in with to change things up? It's always going to be a little bit of, behind closed doors for now, because obviously you can't really play EUNA versus Korea. You can't really do that. I know a lot of Koreans were solo queuing on like West Coast servers. So I know a lot of my friends ended up playing against, Korean solo queues that were pretty god tier already, but you can't have a serious competition on it. The integrity isn't there right now. So it's just going to be watching from afar, but it's going to be how quickly they progress in the FPS scene for me, because obviously they have transferable skills. We've seen how good the Korean scene can get through just Overwatch alone in the FPS market. It's can they transfer that to a game that isn't quite like Overwatch? It's got some factors, but it's more a CS element where they haven't found that success in CS in comparison to the success they've had in Overwatch. And I think it's a fun one. I think it's certainly, everyone starts off at an even playing field. So this is where everyone I should be just catching up every now and then on it. And I think that's what most people are doing, is just kind of checking and going, okay, how good are they getting? Do we have to worry yet? Are we at the worry point or not? So for now, I think we're pretty solid as to where we are, because just the head start. Obviously, a lot of the other regions had earlier access, but yeah, once the competition is able to travel, that's when you get to see your first real glimpse. That first international event will be incredible. I can't wait to see that.
Vegas, there was rumors of a Korean 5-stack queuing in the NA queues early on in the ranked beta. Did you have any experience playing against Korean players? Obviously, the ping situation wouldn't have been ideal, but any experience whatsoever facing off against some of these guys?
I didn't queue against any of the 5-stacks. I did get a lot of people queuing in from Korea, like just solo queues in my games. It's like Lauren was saying, it's when they're at like 200 ping levels, there's no way to even everything's just different. Like the whole game, it's just a completely different game. It's really hard to tell.
Fair enough. My thinking as and just as a brief overview, Rover did win their last tournament. They did get seeded into an upcoming tournament for, I think it's Level Up, or there's a Korean tournament that's going to be invite based on some of these early results that I would like to keep my eye on. But is this a precursor to the big one, China entering the scene? There's been some rumors, of course, of of China receiving a closed invitational event for influencers and other industry people in China regarding an upcoming tactical FPS. A lot of suggestion is that that is Valorant. And if Korea comes in, China follows. We've seen what kind of competition level they bring to basically any game that China gets its hands on, including PUBG. Is that the big one if you're Riot, or is Korean kind of a stepping stone, or is everyone on a level playing field for them?
I don't
Question.
know. Yeah, it's a big question. China's such a hard example. So I look at how those regions have applied in other FPS games. Korea's kind of been the middle ground, I feel like, not so hyper aggressive, but then okay, so let's look at PUBG as the example. When China finally broke in at an international event, we'd been hearing how good they were. Teams had obviously, caught some of the tournaments out there and seen how these guys played, but then you see it in reality, they were playing it like this hyper aggressive, crazy style that was, a little bit out there that people didn't really expect to see, and it kind of caught off some of the highest teams out there in the entire competitive region. Just this never afraid to fight, kind of walking into situations pretty happily without worrying about the downfall. I mean, as I said, we saw that in CS, the hyper aggression definitely caught out a lot of teams initially, and then people kind of went, we just need to kind of slow down the gameplay, use our utility. It was easier to apply that in a game like PUBG when, the elements weren't there, the utility was a little bit different, right? And how the game played out was very different. But in a tactical shooter, you can't just run those hyper aggressive plays. You can technically, but there are counters, right? You have that utility and set maps, set choke points where it's gonna be very hard to apply that. So I think looking at China as a region just from a competitive standpoint, I wonder how stylistically they apply to this, considering Crossfire has been in that region for a while. They have the same style games, right? And they're incredibly good at them. But I don't know how it's going to apply against more of a Western style gameplay. But player base wise, that's where it turns up, right? For Riot, you have to look at China and Korea. They're too much of a player base. They are your cash cows, right? You put it out there, that region will pay you 100%. You get your money from it. But yeah, competitive wise, I'm not sure how it will transfer skill wise across both boards. I think I've seen more exports from Korea that apply to the more Western style of gameplay that work better. I don't know Overwatch too well, if I'm honest about stylistic approach. But yeah, I think cash cow wise, player base wise, you can't ignore China. And if they do, it'd be very surprising, and it's going to be some sort of, rather than it being, Riot just deciding not to, it would be for some sort of political or some sort of, I guess, financial reason to not go out there and do it straight away. You know what I mean? If they're bargaining on how to make the most out of it to get it into that region, then sure. That's pretty why it'd be delayed more than anything, rather than it being, we're just not going to give it to China. So obviously it's a matter of time before it comes around.
I kind of think that China is going to be a big focus for Valorant. The game has been designed specifically to adhere to the strict guidelines, or if you want to call them that, the rules of Chinese broadcasting. We talked about this in previous weeks. The bomb is called the spike, attack and defense. There's eliminations rather than kills, that kind of stuff. There's a lot to be nothing.
Dead bodies can be turned off really easily. That don't take away
Yes.
from the competitive integrity either.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think China is going to be a big focus, and the question then becomes, from a pure population standpoint, competitively, if 0.01% of all Valorant players get to the top echelon, and you have X amount in North America, you have X amount in Europe, you better believe that in China, that population is going to be significantly larger. So I would expect to see China have an influence when they eventually, I'm going to assume that when they come into the fold. But it's easy to speculate about all the things we don't know. But one thing we do know is a lot about this team called Highground. We're going to move into the next topic, which is a real deep dive onto a squad that Lauren, myself, and obviously Vegas have a lot of experience with. Just for a bit of background on this team, all former professional PUBG players, named after the Discord in which they kind of formed, and the original PUBG team, Highground, was the first one signed, and hopefully the first one signed out of that Discord as well this time around. They've got some impressive credentials so far in Valorant, winning a lot of tournaments and placing well in others. Vegas, give us a bit of a background on this squad. I know it, but I want to hear it from you.
Okay, so our team is a very highly competitive background. Obviously, we've had results in other games, but none of us were really, that wasn't really our game. You know, we all wanted to be the best in these type of games. PUBG didn't do it for us, just the RNG factors. Ever since this game was announced and advertised as a competitive shooter, we started, compiling teams of what we wanted to do for this game over 6 months before the game came out. We were already thinking about rosters, personalities, work ethics, all these type of things were already a big deal for us, like way before the game came out. I even moved into a house with Venerated to try and grind this game 3 months before the release. Like this was a big deal for us, and our team we've made one roster change since then, but for the most part, we're fully committed to our new roster. We made one roster change, which was Sharky. Sharky was on our team from the beginning for a couple of weeks, and we just mutually parted ways. We picked up Pride, who was another big PUBG player for Envy, and since then we've had really good success.
So I'm not sure if we want to just glaze over the fact that PUBG was kind of the game you didn't really want to play. Wherein one of the players on your team is would have been a 3-time NPL champion in your boy Dre. So these are all accomplished PUBG players who have over various levels of competition, won their fair share of tournaments. Lauren, I mean, what can we say about a squad that has shown such promise and performance, at least in their respective arenas in previous games? Just kind of shirking that experience and coming to Valorant pretending that PUBG never existed. I don't know how to take that.
I mean, I think that if you look at any FPS player specifically, if you didn't play CS, where would you go, right? And if you weren't playing 1.6 when you were 10 years old, you weren't going to really get into CSGO at the very start anyway. Now you can, but if you hadn't been playing for the last 5 years, you still weren't going to get into a team. And if that game style didn't suit you, you had not much else to go to, honestly. Like as I said, I came from COD 4 and Enemy Territory. Those games died out long ago or moved to console, so it's like I had nowhere else to go, so I went to CS. But being a commentator was a lot easier to slot into than being a player, right? And then PUBG came around. I'm like, oh, that has some of the elements that I really enjoy. I like some of this. I used to play Mill Sims. I liked Armor. I was like, okay, this kind of fits what I enjoy, but it's still not quite my original games. I still like Search and Destroy. I still like a 5v5. I always liked MR12 more than 15. But all of that aside, a lot of these players didn't have a home. And if you're a competitive player, you know how to get good at games. You know the theory, you understand how to do it, you know how to practice well, you know how to apply your skills well. So it was a matter of time before some of the teams went, well, we can get good at PUBG, we'll grind it out, we'll play it, we'll probably enjoy it, right? You get to be competitive, which is the biggest thing. But it's not something you love. When you love a game, grinding isn't that hard. Playing in tournaments is fun. Time doesn't feel the same, and putting in that. So it's like, for me, the most fun I ever had, and it's so sad, was reviewing VODs, anti-stratting people, doing nade practice, doing lineup practices. This was the stuff out of the games. I'd spend an hour before an official warming up and doing my nade lineups, getting everything ready, getting my set routes ready. That was fun to me. I couldn't imagine doing that in a game that I don't love. It becomes very hard. So it's like, for people who played PUBG, you would love the competitive element, sure, but you may not love spending all that extra time. So I can imagine it's very easy for a team who've been very good at the game to go, this wasn't what our hearts wanted, we did it because you're a competitor, but it may not be the be-all and end-all, which is where we're seeing a lot of these players starting to go, Valorant, that seems good.
Yep.
When did that happen for you, Vegas? At what point did you as a squad kind of turn your eyes away from PUBG? Because, I mean, Venerated did leave midway through the NPL's stages. And for those of you who don't know what NPL is, it was the North American PUBG League. It was the premier product that PUBG put together. It only lasted a year, unfortunately, before they shut down. Well, mostly shut down what was their esports program. Venerated left to go play Fortnite. Had some middling success there as a player, but again, I go back to the original question. At what point in this last year did you guys all as a group kind of turn your attention to Valorant?
So I'm pretty sure Venerated left PUBG around before the third phase of the Pro League. And he was on a very good team. Their team still finished top 4 in phase 3 of the Pro League, but he lost interest and decided to play Fortnite temporarily before the next big game caught his interest. Same thing with your boy Dre. Your boy Dre won the first and second phase of the Pro League and still decided to quit because he lost interest before the third. Both of them were the same wavelength. They both wanted to quit. I was in a different situation where obviously, like, I had been grinding. I was unable to play in the Pro League until phase 3 because I was age restricted. So I didn't wait a year to play in the pro league just to quit before I could play. So I stuck with my commitments, and I played phase 3 and played in the world championship, and then after that was when I realized that okay, now I'm not on an org anymore. I'm done. New year. I should probably put my focus is somewhere greater, and where else other than with my friends that are in the same wave. So that's when after the global championship, I started playing a little bit more, but I was pretty much waiting for Valorant.
Lots of experience. Yeah, obviously through 2018, 2019, PUBG was still a major focus and a lot of competitive experience there. As a team, I'm interested to know. Tell me a little bit about the squad. Now we know them individually, at least I do. But for those who don't know, let's talk about the roles on your squad. Who's calling the shots? Who is kind of the hard carry? Who's tell me about your team.
So our team is we have 3 vocal players and 2 less vocal players, but it doesn't mean they don't communicate. That's just how our shot calling works. It's me, Valiate, and Venerated are our 3 more so vocal players. We obviously do a lot of strats outside of the game, but in the game, Venerated would be more of the final decision kind of guy. Me and Valiate are very vocal, but Ven pretty much calls in the heat of the moment, he'll call, okay, we need to rotate now, we need to do this now. Riot and your boy Dre are our silent killers, I like to call it. I don't know. Sometimes they won't talk for 10 seconds, and all of a sudden they get 3 kills. And you're like, all right, well, that's great. Other than that, we're very team focused. Like I played Sage for a while. I recently stepped down from that role, but we've been playing the same character since day one. We just made our first swap like last week, but we were all pretty committed to the characters we were playing. We have your boy Dre is playing our Sage now. I'm playing Breach. Pride plays Brimstone. Venerated plays Sova or Viper, depending on the map. We all are pretty much sticking with the same characters, the same roles, and we're all crafting around that. I don't know. Do you have any other questions for that? I'd start to explain without.
No, it's okay. I was more interested in just the team dynamic. Obviously, you guys all know each other quite well. And to kind of cap off what you're talking, I'm not sure I've heard Dre speak in the last 2 years I've known him, so I can definitely see him slotting into that quiet assassin. And same thing with Pride. They all have a lot of everyone has a lot of pedigree here, and obviously your results speak for themselves. I'm interested to know what has been your biggest. What was the biggest adjustment coming from PUBG over to Valorant for you guys?
Well, before Valorant came out, as a core 3, me, Venerated, and Dre grinded CS every day after our PUBG practices. We'd stay up late grinding rank 10 Face It or ESCA, whatever. We played that. We tried to slot in about 3 hours in between PUBG practices and stuff like that, just to prepare for Valorant sort of things. Really, the biggest thing is just transitioning working as a team in a more of a tactical 5v5 shooter. It's just obviously completely different, but it's nothing we're not capable of. And a lot of people, there's a lot of gatekeeping going around, with the whole entering Valorant. Oh, you didn't come from Counter-Strike. Okay, we didn't come from Counter-Strike, not because we weren't capable. It's just the game's been out for 14 years. How are we supposed to break into the scene? Our first game, it's impossible. So there was a lot of gatekeeping in the beginning, but the main thing is just we're mechanically just as good as all these other people, and as a team, we've been trying to be the best teammates we can be. And that's where we found our success. So I think we're a little bit ahead of everybody else in terms of teamwork.
Has that motivated you at all? The gatekeeping, the non-CS, you're not endemic to the scene. Has that motivated you guys to put a little bit more fuel on the fire?
Oh, 100%. Because we go into these lobbies playing in finals of tournaments against MouseSpaz or now TSM. And everybody is just in the chat, PUBG lol, this is a 13-0. And we're like, okay, we're on the same caliber as all these guys. We're the underdogs. In any game we go into against any Counter-Strike pros, even if they're 40-year-old 1.6 pros, we're still the underdog because we're not Counter-Strike. And that's just how it works. So definitely it's nice to prove them wrong whenever we beat these guys, but everybody kind of expects us to be terrible. So it's nice beating all these Counter-Strike pros when there's been a lot of gatekeeping.
Underestimating the PUBG players, and honestly that doesn't surprise me. Counter-Strike was always labeled as the natural evolution of what Valorant was trying to be. So if you had that CS experience, you're kind of expected to be good at Valorant in a way. So it's nice to see that the PUBG crew is out there throwing punches with the best of them right now. And this is obviously not something you will be able to directly answer, but has there been any interest in your team from an org perspective?
Of course, there's a lot of orgs that we're looking at. There's probably like 15, 20 orgs that were looking at these like 5 teams that were free agents. So there's a lot of competition. That's where you've seen a lot of the boosted salary numbers. A lot of that is because there's pure competition. One org wants to offer this team 8, and they say we're going to sign this 8 org for 8 right now, but if you pay us 10, we'll sign with you instead. So that's where a lot of the inflated numbers come in. But there's definitely a lot of interest.
So, has there been anything preventing you from saying yes to one of these deals?
No.
Okay, so anything to expect coming up soon then?
Nothing right now publicly.
Okay, well, I won't make your head explode, but I want to talk a little bit about Vegas, the player. Yeah, I'm of course I'm interested to see how you guys progress, and I'm rooting for you as a fan and as someone we've known for a couple of years now. We're all hoping that you guys land on your feet somewhere nice and cushy and get the respect you deserve. So I want to talk a little bit about Vegas, the player. We obviously, when I first met you, you were a young guy. You got age gated out of PUBG for the most part. Once the pro leagues came into effect, you moved. Where did you move from, and where did you move to?
I moved from San Diego, California, to Ashburn, Virginia. This was a big connection thing, a competitive integrity thing. Is playing competitively from San Diego, and especially in PUBG and Fortnite, which was Venerated was playing at the time, is impossible. You're not. It's especially Fortnite. Fortnite playing at a high ping level, you're just at an immediate disadvantage. So Venerated bought a house with his brother who plays Fortnite for TSM in an area where we get 0 ping for Fortnite, and I also get 0 ping for PUBG. So about 6 months ago, I moved out to Virginia to get a lower ping. Also, it helps being on the same team as Venerated and living in the same, practicing in the same room. That helps a lot. I found a lot of help out of that. That's the move I did about 6 months ago.
Nice.
So I know that your dad was a big part of your competitive experience in PUBG. Obviously, a very supportive guy. Has he come along with you, or is this now a remote support situation?
Oh, he's never left. We were already talking about Valorant. I explain everything to him, and he understands. He loves PUBG. He has more hours in PUBG than me. I'm serious. My dad and Venerated's parents have a 4-stack, and they play PUBG every day, and they're upset that we left.
Amazing.
But they understand why we're leaving, and they obviously still support us in every single way possible in the transition. They understand. They understand it's a career. It's not just like it's not a short-term interest. PUBG is not our game. PUBG was a stepping stone in our career. It's not. It's not where our heart is still.
And I think it's super important to have that parental support. Venerated, obviously, his parents are very supportive as well. I know Caden's parents were there a lot as well. So it's great to have the support of the parents in this early stages of your guys' probably lengthy careers in esports. What did you tell me about your PUBG? Like candidly, at what point were you like, you know what, fuck this game, I'm out of here for PUBG?
Well, very soon, very, very quickly into my career in PUBG is when I stopped playing the game outside of a competitive. Like, very quickly, like I'm talking 6 months in, I stopped playing pubs, and I found a lot of success in that. Actually, it was more so for like a success thing. Like, I found myself performing better in scrims when I didn't play the game publicly because I was frustrated about the game every day when I played it. So I pretty much played strictly scrims in like training range for mechanics for almost my whole PUBG career. But about same time when Venerated quit and Dre quit was when I completely knew that I was going to leave soon. That was the point. About phase 3 MPL when everybody else was quitting and the game was going downhill. That's when I knew.
Pansy, I have all these questions, but I want to know if you have anything for Vegas.
Yeah, no, I just want to ask about transferable skills, or what kind of. I know you've obviously played a lot of CS in your like own time, so you definitely kind of got a lot of the fundamentals down. But I speak to a lot of CS, ex pros or current pros in Valorant, and they can say, they can definitely tell when they're playing with an Overwatch player, for example. They don't double peek, they don't know what defaults are, they don't kind of understand some of the theory. They can aim just as well as anyone else, but that mental theory isn't necessarily on the same level yet. How have your skills transferred with your team? Like, how many of you, obviously you said you played a lot of CS, getting to rank 10 on Face, it's a decent grind. I mean, that's a lot of playing already, but it's like, what was the most surprising thing you picked up early on? Like, did you already have a lot of the kind of fundamentals down? Did you already understand a lot of the basic concepts of Counter-Strike that you could apply as a team?
Yeah. So, believe it or not, I've watched more CS than anybody, even throughout all my other esports careers. Before I started playing PUBG in 2015, I was traveling to go to CS LANs as a spectator. I would watch, Counter-Strike major events. I've got a lot of time. I've got a lot more time watching Counter-Strike Pro events than playing. So there's a lot of fundamentals and team mechanics that I've observed in the past. Same thing with my teammates. We've had a lot of individual Counter-Strike time, so we picked up pretty quickly on all the mechanics just from observing over the years.
Just to kind of follow on from that, how are you kind of practicing this? Like PUBG, you said you didn't play public games and you didn't really enjoy that side of it. When it comes to things like Valorant, how are you practicing? Because I guess are you going for the same sort of approach where it's mostly scrims, you're just completely focused on the public side, or are you playing everything right now?
So the reason PUBG I didn't play the public side was PUBG was a completely different game. The public match had completely different settings, mechanics. It wasn't even worth practicing. Uh, Valorant I'm definitely focusing on competitive. We play like we probably scrim 5 hours a day, watch VODs for like 3 hours, then different kind of executes for a couple more hours every day or whatever. And then after that, or before that rather, to manage sleep schedule, we grind ranked as a duo or 3OQ or whatever. But it's been eat sleep Valorant for ever since day one of release. But it's definitely better to play public matches in this game compared to PUBG because it's the same game.
I'm interested to know. I know that you guys are. Do you currently have a coach? I understand 17 has been listed as your coach. He's the current coach for Team Liquid's PUBG team. Can you speak a little bit about the early experience using him as a coach and how has that been working for you?
Okay, so ever since the beginning, 17 helps field our roster. This is something he's been interested in as well. He wants to see us succeed in this game, and he's been a tremendous help from a mental perspective and as a strategy perspective, like strategic perspective. He's just been a major help ever since day one of the game coming out. Ever since he helped us form our roster, he helped us find pride, all that kind of stuff. He's been a tremendous help when it comes to our team's atmosphere. Like he's been with us all day, every day since day one outside of his PUBG.
Without, I suppose, putting it in a negative light, I'm just interested to know when Sharky was on the roster versus the decision to move away. You said it was mutual. What was the decision making there? The early days of the roster versus what you're playing for, who you're playing with now. What was the big change there? Changing out Pride for Sharky.
We already have 3 vocal players. We have, like I said, it was me, Venerated, and Valiate are pretty vocal already. And I felt like it was just too much. Sharky was very vocal, very adamant about certain things, and it was very messy. When we were losing and we were trying to figure out what to do in the next round, there was way too much going on, and it was not ideal. And there were some personality clashes, and that just wasn't going to last if we wanted to be the best in this game. And everybody understands that we were not going to be the best with that roster. We had to make some sort of change, and everybody's at the point where it's not like PUBG where there's going to be a couple people lacking in behind, and you're like, oh, should we replace these guys? They're kind of our friends. No, it's pretty cutthroat. It's like, we're not going to be the best with this roster. We're changing this person immediately, and this is how it's going to go.
Business is kind of the way she goes, right?
Yep.
So I think that could you call Valiate vocal, or would you call him more of like a machine gun with a mouth?
Valiant's vocal. He's very vocal.
Listening to Valiant's and shout out to Valiant, tremendous guy, obviously very smart and vocal. I think it's putting it lightly. I can only imagine what the comms are like. It's been fun to watch and listen to him on the stages over the various PUBG tournaments, just screaming at the top of his lungs. But I'm interested to see how you guys do. So, what is your expectation for this next year? What do you guys expect to accomplish? And outside of the whole organization settling into the tournament structure, what are your expectations for yourself, and how are you going to try and meet those goals?
Okay, so our obvious goal is to be the best, as everybody. That sounds corny. Right now, we're the best unsigned team in North America. We're looking to change that soon, and right now, we're part of our scrim groups are specifically against the top 8 teams, top 6 teams rather. And I think we're planning on doing the same thing we're doing right now. Just grinding with the same 6 best teams over and over again. We're going to play whoever's good and consistently play whoever's good. And I think we're going to continue to stay at the top. I feel like if we're playing the best teams every day, all day, I don't see a world where our practice is the best. We're going to maintain to be the best. That's kind of our goal.
Pansy, any closing questions for Vegas?
In the NA scene right now, how do you see the landscape? Who do you think's kind of, the top team, at least consistently? It's kind of hard to tell, but obviously you're playing the scrims, so you get an idea of who you think consistently is the better team. Maybe like a top 3, top 4. Who do you think kind of sits in that spot? Who's around that marker right now?
Well, up until a week ago, MouseSpaz was pretty much undefeated, rather than a couple of instances. MouseSpaz is obviously very strong. TeamSam, rather. Gen G is a very, very good. Gen G is the best teamwork, to be honest, out of all these other teams. TSM is very consistent mechanically. They're really ahead of the game. It also helps they have Wardell, who's just the best operator I've ever seen. He kind of, when he has an op, that team's completely different than when Wardell doesn't have an op. They're two different teams. It's kind of funny. So like, there's ways to prevent that. When he doesn't have an op, you can try and target that, and then it's a lot easier to beat them. But I don't know. I feel like Gen G, TSM, and T1 are Cloud9. I'm curious to see what they put together because they've shown a lot of potential in scrims. But I think consistently, Gen G and TSM are the two most consistent.
Great. Well, Vegas, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to chat with you. Pansy, always a pleasure as well. Thank you guys so much for your time this week. Don't forget, you can follow Do Not Peek on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, youtube.com/do-not-peek, twitter.com/dnpeek, and the same on Twitch at dnpeek as well, where you're watching. So don't forget to follow all those channels. We will be back next week with more Valoranting, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. Don't forget it. We'll see you guys here next week. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you out there.